In this final section, we will look at some recent news stories that are affecting infant toddler mental health. We will begin by looking at the separation of children and families at the border and the impacts to infant toddler mental health. Zero to Three is an organization that works to advance the healthy development of America's babies and young children. They have put out a statement on the separation of children and families at the border. What they say is, out of deep concern for young children, families, and the future of our country, Zero to Three stands in strong, informed opposition to any practice that causes trauma and long-term harm to children. As we apply our research-based lens to the current policy options being considered, we have three priorities. First, families who have been separated must be reunified immediately, and the practice of separating children from their parents must not be revisited. While the rapid and foundational development of infants and toddlers makes them particularly vulnerable to trauma, families offer an essential buffer to those experiences. When children are separated from their parents after crossing the border, that primary bond is severed. This causes stress hormones to flood babies' brains, disrupting their neurological circuitry in ways that profoundly affect their short and long-term physical and emotional health, and their ability to form relationships and learn. The broad consensus of researchers and practitioners is that to continue to separate families in this way is akin to child abuse. Additionally, children who have already been separated must be immediately reunited with their caregivers, providing them with the close relationship they need to cope with the trauma that they have undergone. Second, family detention is not an acceptable alternative for babies, toddlers, and families. No amount of time in detention has been proven safe for young children. Sending infants and toddlers, even with their parents, to institutional detention is profoundly inadequate to nurture the health and well-being of a young child. Years of research in child development clearly shows that babies' physical and social environments have a significant impact on their development. Family detention places children in an environment of confinement, deprivation of stimuli, and developmentally inappropriate and often harsh treatment, which cause severe stress for both the child and the caregivers. Evaluations of children who have been detained with their families reveal alarming outcomes for young children, with many displaying developmental delays and signs of emotional disturbance. If the legal protections established for children's care in such facilities, including time limits and regulations, are challenged and reversed, infants and toddlers and their families placed in detention facilities are entirely vulnerable to protracted, unlimited stays, abuse, and neglect. Further compounding the risks to their well-being, families in detention may face inadequate accesses to services, including the medical and mental health care they so desperately need. Lastly, young children who are or have been separated from their families need access to voluntary infant and early childhood mental health services and support. Decades of psychological brain research have demonstrated that adverse experiences during this critical period of early childhood include forced parental separation and placement in incarceration-like settings can have profound, immediate, and long-term harm on child development. In the short term, children may experience anxiety, depression, and self-regulatory issues, including sleeplessness or eating issues. Over time, they may show regression in behavior and cognition and demonstrate symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. This type of trauma, particularly when not addressed by an experienced and trusted clinician, has severe implications for both physical and emotional health over time, increasing young children's risk for learning difficulties, problems forming relationships, and adult health issues. Caregivers who are also deeply psychologically and physiologically impacted by their recent experiences also need support to provide their children with the care they need. Reunification itself may be difficult, as separated young children don't have the capacity to understand what has transpired and may feel abandoned by their parents. This is complex work, requiring a focus on both parent and child, and requiring specialized expertise and developmentally appropriate evidence-based support. Infant and early childhood mental health professionals across the United States are able to help, but they need pathways to families. The second thing we will look at are the effects of the opioid crisis on infants and toddlers. As states develop and implement strategies to combat the current epidemic of opioid use disorder, many are focusing on whole family prevention and treatment approaches. Evidence shows that providing parents with supports that help them care for their families and provide children with services and supports for their developmental, behavioral, and social-emotional needs can help mitigate the long-term impacts of opioid use disorder. The federal government is also making significant investments in a variety of programs, including Medicaid, behavioral health, public health, child welfare, and criminal justice to help states address the opioid epidemic and meet the needs of young children. The statistics on overdoses, deaths, and economic costs are stunning, but they do not fully convey the human toll of the epidemic. Children and youth affected by the familial substance use disorder are at risk themselves for disrupted lives, school problems, trauma-related anxiety, and potential use of the drugs that caused the problems in the first place. Children are often hidden from view until a crisis in the family, like overdose, death, arrest, or incarceration occurs. Even then, they are seldom identified as needing help. The opioid epidemic is a multifactorial and a multi-generational problem, and the solutions must recognize all these complexities. Opioid exposure in utero can cause an infant to experience neonatal abstinence syndrome due to sudden withdrawal. Neonatal abstinence syndrome has an array of signs and symptoms, including severe irritability, breathing difficulty, respiratory problems, and seizures, and typically leads to costly inpatient hospital stays for infants. The incidence of neonatal abstinence syndrome has increased rapidly, with a five-fold increase in the rates of infants born with neonatal abstinence syndrome between 2004 and 2014. Infants with neonatal abstinence syndrome spend 16.5 days on average in the hospital, and the treatment of a single neonatal abstinence syndrome case exceeds $16,000. There has also been a significant and steady increase in pediatric hospitalizations due to opioid ingestion and poisoning across children of all age groups. Between 2004 and 2015, pediatric opioid-related hospital admission rates increased by 39%. Young children are particularly vulnerable to accidental opioid ingestion. Children aged 5 and younger accounted for one-third of the hospitalizations during this period. The opioid epidemic is also associated with an increase in the number of children entering foster care. After a period of decline between 2007 and 2012, the number of children entering foster care rose, with a near 10% increase from 2012 to 2016. While changes in child care welfare caseloads vary by state, the nationwide increase correlates with overdose deaths and drug-related hospitalizations, both of which are associated with the opioid epidemic. In fiscal year 2016, 34% of out-of-home placements were attributed to substance misuse by a parent. Children affected by parental substance use are at a higher risk for behavioral and psychosocial problems. Parental opioid use is considered an adverse childhood experience, which is a potentially traumatic event that can include abuse, neglect, and household challenges. Adverse childhood experiences are strongly associated with a wide range of negative consequences for health and well-being later in life, such as chronic health conditions, risky behaviors, lower academic achievement, and early death. Adverse childhood experiences have cumulative effects. As children with parental substance use disorder experience additional adverse childhood experiences, they are more likely to experience later issues. Children of parents with substance use disorder are also more likely to develop substance use problems themselves. Increasingly, early childhood education providers have come to rely on infant and early childhood mental health consultants as trusted partners who can provide support, resources, strategies, and community connections. Consultants can have expertise in infant and early childhood mental health, parenting, family engagement, and the impact of trauma and behavioral health issues on children. They can help early childhood education providers understand and support families who may be affected by opioid use. Consultants can also work with providers to enhance their efficacy, job satisfaction, and engagement. Consultants can help in many ways. They can provide information about the effects of opioid misuse and its potential impacts on families and children. The consultant can share, for example, information about neonatal abstinence syndrome, addiction, related stress, and risk factors that accompany substance use disorders, and most importantly, effective strategies to support families. The consultant can be a source of hope and can assist staff in understanding factors that contribute to resilience in children and families. The consultant may also help staff understand how substance misuse may increase risks for domestic violence, and how family disruptions can affect children. How consultants can help staff identify signs that a child may be experiencing trauma or stress, including possible substance misuse in the family. The consultant can help staff understand symptoms and behaviors such as outbursts, aggression, high activity levels, attention or concentration problems, and distress. The consultant can provide tips on how to create a safe environment for all the children, those dealing with opioid-related trauma and others, and help staff strategize and overcome discomfort talking with families about any concerns related to substance use. This includes education about causes of substance use disorders and effects on parenting, families, and function. The consultant can also address stigma, bias, and feelings that staff themselves may have based on their own personal or family experiences with drugs and alcohol. Staff may need assistance in recognizing their critical role in supporting positive parenting practices, even among parents whose capacities are compromised by substance misuse. Assisting with navigation of community systems, services, and referrals, including family-centered health care providers who can treat parents with substance use disorders, community coalitions that provide substance use prevention and treatment resources, programs that work with children who have experienced trauma, relevant cultural connections in the community, help staff support families as they grapple with parenting and protecting children while dealing with substance use disorders, including while in treatment or waiting for treatment slots to open. This includes helping staff support other family members, such as grandparents and foster parents. Staff may be able to offer encouragement and strategies for maintaining stability and predictability in children's lives and home environments. Staff play a vital role in the stability and consistency they offer to children in their classroom. This concludes Module 4's PowerPoint. I hope you have learned a lot, and I hope you know it is up to all of us to help keep this conversation going and keeping infant-toddler mental health in the forefront of everyone's hearts and minds.